Imagine waking up one morning and opening the news to find that a foreign intelligence agency had just assassinated one of your country's most senior military generals. Not on a battlefield, not in a war zone, but in the heart of your capital city. On the street where he walked every single morning, outside the apartment building where he had lived for years, in a neighborhood that your own security services had classified as secure. Now imagine that it happened again, 4 months later. Same city, same result. And then a third time. 3 of Russia's most powerful military figures killed inside Moscow, the most surveilled, most locked down, most aggressively protected city in Europe, within the span of 14 months. And Russia, for all its intelligence apparatus, for all the FSB's resources, for all of Vladimir Putin's personal involvement in the investigations, cannot stop it, cannot explain it, cannot answer the single most terrifying question hanging over the Kremlin right now. How is Ukraine doing this? That question doesn't just belong to Russia. It belongs to every intelligence analyst, every military strategist, every defense ministry in the world that is watching what is unfolding in real time and quietly recalculating everything they thought they knew about modern warfare, about intelligence operations, and about what a smaller nation can do to a nuclear superpower when it decides to fight with absolute precision instead of conventional force. But here is what makes this story truly extraordinary. The assassination campaign inside Moscow is only one half of a much larger geopolitical earthquake that is reshaping the entire world order right now. Oh, because at the same time that Ukraine is demonstrating what a determined intelligence service can accomplish against a power-fuel adversary, something equally seismic is happening on the other side of the globe. Saudi Arabia, America's most important military partner in the Middle East, the country that has bought hundreds of billions of dollars worth of American weapons, the country whose entire military was built around American technology, has quietly, systematically, and deliberately begun turning toward China, not because it had no choice, because it made a choice. And the moment you understand why, the entire architecture of American global power suddenly looks very different than it did before. These two stories, Ukraine's invisible war inside Russia and Saudi Arabia's silent realignment away from the United States, are not separate events. They are symptoms of the same fundamental shift in how power works in the 21st century. And understanding them together is the only way to understand where the world is actually heading. So let's start in Moscow. Because what Ukraine has built there is something that has no clean historical parallel. The organization responsible for the assassination campaign operating inside Russia is not what most people picture when they imagine a wartime intelligence agency. Ukraine's Military Intelligence Directorate, known by its Ukrainian acronym HUR, was established in 1992 from the remnants of Soviet military intelligence assets, when Ukraine became an independent nation. For most of the 30 years that followed, it was a competent but largely unremarkable institution. It gathered signals, intelligence, ran agents, produced assessments. It did what military intelligence services do in peacetime, useful work, conducted invisibly, attracting very little international attention. Then, February 24th, 2022 arrived, and everything changed. The full-scale Russian invasion did not just transform Ukraine's military. It transformed its intelligence services into something fundamentally new. Something that even the historians who study covert operations and intelligence history are struggling to categorize, because no modern intelligence agency has conducted offensive operations at this scale, with this consistency, against a nuclear-armed adversary's senior military leadership inside that adversary's own territory. The HOAR, under the leadership of Lieutenant General Kirilo Budanov, who guided the directorate through the critical years of the war until early 2026, evolved from a defensive intelligence gathering institution into what its own official documentation describes as an architect of a new model of warfare. The owl on the HUR's emblem, plunging a sword downward with a Latin motto that translates to "the wise shall rule over the stars," is not decorative symbolism. It is, it turns out, a statement of operational intent. The first killing in the sequence that shocked the world happened on the morning of December 17th, 2024, in a residential district of southeastern Moscow that Russian security planners had assessed as secure. Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov walked out of his apartment building at approximately 8 in the morning. He was one of Russia's most powerful military figures, the commanding officer of Russia's radiological, chemical, and biological defense forces, the man personally responsible for the military units that handled nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare capabilities, a figure of such operational sensitivity that the FSB had kept his home address classified for years. He never made it to his car. An explosive device had been concealed inside an electric scooter parked near the building's entrance. When Kirillov and his aide emerged into the morning air, the device detonated. Both men died. Ukraine's security service, the SBU, claimed responsibility almost immediately. A source within the agency told journalists that Kirillov was a war criminal and a legitimate target. and noted pointedly that the same fate awaited all those who kill Ukrainians. The message was not designed to be subtle. It was designed to be read by every other Russian general on Ukraine's list and understood as exactly what it was, a notification of intent. The second assassination came on April 25th, 2025. Another senior Russian general killed by a shrapnel-packed explosive device planted in his vehicle in a Moscow suburb. The precision was clinical, but the operational security was extraordinary. The FSB launched a full criminal investigation. Putin was personally briefed. And Russia's best answer to what had just happened, again in one of its own major cities, was to point at Kiev and admit, without quite saying it directly, that its security services had failed in a way that had no precedent in the post-Soviet era. Then came February 6, 2026. A shooter disguised as a food delivery courier entered an apartment building in Moscow. He waited in the stairwell. When one of Russia's most decorated intelligence officers left for work that morning, the shooter put 3 bullets into him at close range and disappeared before the FSB could respond. A third killing, a third failure of the Russian security apparatus in its own capital. A third demonstration that Ukraine's intelligence service had penetrated the most protected urban environment in Europe with a consistency that defied every conventional assumption about what is operationally possible. Nobody in Moscow can explain how Ukraine keeps doing it, and that inability to explain is itself arguably the most frightening military fact of the entire war. Because when the world's preeminent nuclear power cannot protect its senior generals from assassination inside its own capital, every strategic calculation that its adversaries and its allies have been making suddenly requires revision. The question of how Ukraine is accomplishing this takes us into the architecture of modern intelligence operations in ways that are genuinely revelatory. The answer is not a single technique or a single piece of technology. It is a combination of factors that have converged to give Ukraine's intelligence service capabilities that far exceed what its size and resources would suggest should be possible. Part of it is the network of Ukrainian citizens and sympathizers inside Russia who have chosen, at extraordinary personal risk, to provide information about military figures, their movements, their addresses, their routines. The Russian-speaking world is far less monolithic in its support for the Kremlin's war than Russian state media would suggest, and Ukraine's intelligence services have spent years cultivating relationships with people inside Russia who are willing to act. The full-scale invasion, rather than uniting Russians behind Putin as the Kremlin hoped, created a significant number of people inside Russia who were horrified by what their country was doing, and who, in some cases, were willing to help Ukraine do something about it. Part of it is signals intelligence and open source intelligence analysis that has become extraordinarily sophisticated. Modern Moscow residents live their lives on smartphones, and smartphones leak information in ways that professional security training can reduce but almost never eliminate entirely. Tracking patterns, identifying residences, mapping routines. These capabilities have become dramatically more accessible to intelligence services that invest in the right analytical infrastructure. And part of it is something harder to quantify. The operational culture that Ukraine's intelligence services have built since 2022. The willingness to attempt operations that prior risk assessments would have categorized as impossible. The acceptance of long timelines, months of preparation for operations that execute in seconds. The understanding that in asymmetric warfare, precision is a force multiplier that compensates for the resource disadvantages that a smaller nation inevitably faces against a larger one. What Ukraine has demonstrated in the stairwells and parking lots and street corners of Moscow is that the era in which nuclear powers could operate with impunity inside their own borders, confident that the nuclear umbrella provided protection not just against military invasion but against all forms of strategic pressure, is over. The asymmetry of modern intelligence capabilities has changed the calculation, and that change will reverberate through military and intelligence planning for decades. Now let's move to the other side of the world. Because while Ukraine has been quietly rewriting the rules of intelligence warfare, Saudi Arabia has been quietly rewriting the rules of geopolitical alliance, and the implications are just as profound. For nearly 8 decades, the relationship between Saudi Arabia and the United States operated on the logic of one of the most elegant deals in modern geopolitical history. Saudi Arabia sits on the largest proven oil reserves on the planet. The United States, for decades, needed that oil to power its economy, its military, and its global dominance. The arrangement was beautifully simple. Saudi Arabia sells its oil in US dollars, keeps those dollars circulating through American financial institutions, and in exchange receives the ultimate security guarantee. American troops stationed on Saudi soil, American weapons filling Saudi arsenals, the extended protection of American military power covering the entire Arabian Peninsula. This arrangement, the petrodollar system, was for 50 years the invisible backbone of American global financial dominance. Every barrel of oil sold anywhere on Earth was a small, daily vote of confidence in the American dollar. The system was self-reinforcing and seemed unassailable. Then it started to crack, not all at once, slowly through a sequence of events that each seemed manageable in isolation, but whose cumulative weight told a story that the leadership in Riyadh absorbed with the analytical clarity that survival requires. The turning point that Saudi analysts return to most consistently is September 2019. Iranian drones and cruise missiles struck Saudi Arabia's Abqaiq oil processing facility, the single most important piece of energy infrastructure on the planet, responsible for processing roughly 5% of the world's daily oil supply. The facility was engulfed in fire. Satellite images showed catastrophic damage. The world held its breath, waiting to see what America would do. What America did was say it was locked and loaded. And then it did essentially nothing of military consequence. For Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, watching smoke pour out of the facility that underpinned his country's entire economic existence, that moment crystallized a question that had been forming in the background of Saudi strategic thinking for years. If the United States would not respond militarily to a direct attack on the kingdom's most critical infrastructure, what exactly was the security guarantee worth? Then came August 2021. The images of the American withdrawal from Afghanistan, chaotic, undignified, with 2 decades of investment evaporating in days, sent a shockwave through every American ally in the world. But nowhere was the reaction more consequential than in Riyadh and Abu Dhabi. The leaders of the Gulf states watched America abandon partners it had supported for 20 years, leave behind its military equipment, and retreat in a manner that no one could frame as strategic. And they asked themselves a question that would reshape the entire geopolitical architecture of the Middle East. If America could walk away from Afghanistan after 20 years, what guarantee existed that it couldn't walk away from us? That question produced a strategy. Saudi Arabia and its Gulf partners began quietly, methodically, and with genuine patience, diversifying their strategic relationships in ways that reduced their dependence on any single superpower. And the country that benefited most from that decision was not a European ally, not a regional partner. It was China. The Chinese approach to Saudi Arabia was as different from the American approach as it is possible to imagine. America arrived in Riyadh with conditions: human rights concerns, democratic reform expectations, congressional debates over arms sales, public criticism from American politicians about the kingdom's domestic policies, congressional hearings, Twitter storms, the complicated, messy, publicly visible friction of dealing with a democratic system in which different power centers compete and the outcomes are never guaranteed. China arrived with something far simpler: no conditions, no lectures about press freedom, no Senate hearings, no public criticism of the kingdom's leadership, just technology, trade, investment, and a form of transactional respect that an absolute monarchy finds infinitely easier to work with than the perpetually unpredictable dynamics of American democratic politics. The signals that something fundamental was changing began to accumulate in ways that were individually easy to dismiss and collectively impossible to ignore. In 2022, Saudi Arabia began serious conversations with China about pricing a portion of its oil sales to China in Chinese yuan rather than exclusively in US dollars. For anyone who understood how deeply the petrodollar system was embedded in the architecture of American global financial power, this was not an economic news story. It was an act of geopolitical deliberation whose implications stretched far beyond the transaction itself. The entire foundation of American financial dominance since 1974 had rested on the agreement that oil would be sold in dollars. Introducing yuan pricing, even for a fraction of the volume, was a crack in the foundation of the entire system. And then came the weapons. Saudi Arabia has been systematically diversifying its military technology procurement, acquiring advanced Chinese drone systems, investing in joint defense manufacturing arrangements, and building relationships with Chinese defense suppliers that would have been unthinkable 5 years ago. The significance of this is not purely military. When a country changes where it buys its weapons, it changes its supply chains, its maintenance relationships, its training programs, its intelligence sharing arrangements, and ultimately its strategic orientation. Arms deals are not just commercial transactions. They are long-term commitments that shape the entire architecture of a military alliance. What unites these two stories, Ukraine's assassination campaign in Moscow and Saudi Arabia's strategic realignment toward China, is a single underlying truth about how power actually works in the 21st century. The old rules are breaking. The rule that nuclear powers are untouchable inside their own borders, Ukraine is rewriting it. The rule that American military dominance automatically translates into durable political alliance, Saudi Arabia is rewriting it. The rule that the world's most powerful security guarantee is worth whatever its guarantor says it's worth. Both stories, in very different ways, are challenging it simultaneously. Russia cannot protect its generals in its own capital. America cannot retain the loyalty of its most important Middle Eastern partner simply by pointing to decades of shared history and the size of its arms sales. The countries that are succeeding in this new environment are the ones that understand something the old powers have been slow to grasp, that in an era of distributed intelligence capabilities, precision becomes the ultimate force multiplier, and in an era of multipolar competition, reliability, consistent, unconditional transactional reliability is more valuable than any formal alliance commitment whose actual content depends on the domestic politics of the guarantor at any given moment. Ukraine has built one of the most effective covert operations programs in modern intelligence history, not because it has the most resources, but because it has the clearest strategic purpose and the willingness to operate at the outer edge of what anyone thought was possible. Saudi Arabia has made a strategic pivot that will reshape the Middle East for a generation, not because it has abandoned its relationship with the United States, but because it has concluded, rationally, on the basis of observed evidence, that depending on any single superpower for security in the current environment is a form of strategic vulnerability that a serious nation can no longer afford. The owl on the Huor's emblem plunges its sword downward. The Saudi kingdom points its future eastward. And somewhere in the gap between what we thought we knew about how power works and what is actually happening right now, the real story of the 21st century is being written. The question is whether the audiences that need to understand it most, the policymakers in Washington, the strategists in Moscow, the alliance managers in every Western capital, are reading it in time to respond, or whether by the time the full picture becomes impossible to ignore, the world they thought they were operating in will already have been replaced by something none of their models prepared them for. History doesn't announce itself. It just arrives. And right now, if you know where to look, you can see it arriving in the stairwells of Moscow and the palace corridors of Riyadh. Quietly, precisely, and with a clarity of strategic purpose that the old world order never saw coming.